Hey, I'm Jennifer Blanchard. I'm an author and writing coach, and I'm going to tell you today about the number three thing that keeps you from writing your novel. So, how many times has this happened to you? You have an amazing idea for a story, so you write it down on a post it note. Then later, you're at the grocery store and you have another bit of inspiration for that same story, but since you're not at home, you end up, digging through your purse and finding a piece of paper and writing the idea down on the back of it. Then later, you're out with your friends, you're having a good time, and you get another blip of inspiration. Whoops, still have no way to write it down. So you grab a napkin, jot it down quick, and shove the napkin in your purse. But now you're home and you're ready to work on that story, and you can't seem to find all those random pieces of paper that you wrote all your notes on. Or how about this? Maybe you've got the story idea thing organized, it's just that your actual stories are all over the place. So instead of having drafts of compelling stories, you have drafts full of episodic scenes, none of which actually link together in a bigger way. So your stories are basically lacking structure and architecture, which is all caused by one thing, and it's the number three thing that keeps you from writing your novel: disorganization. So while this might not stop you from attempting to write a novel, it's definitely going to stop you from writing a novel that you can publish. Thankfully, disorganization is pretty easy to fix. First, you have to organize your story ideas. So, no more having your notes all over the place. Get a writer's notebook or use a program like Evernote or, Google Documents or, Dropbox or something that has folders to keep everything in one place. And if you do it this way, basically, every story will have its own notebook or its own folder. And that way, when you have another piece of inspiration come for that same story, you just grab the notebook, write it down, and then you've got it all in one place. And you're not having to run around trying to find, this piece of paper and this napkin here and, this notebook over here. If everything is in one place, it just makes your life so much easier. And it also makes it, easier to write your novel because you're more organized, you have everything in one place, and you're not trying to track it all down. Now, after your story ideas are organized, it's time to make sure that your actual stories are organized too. So all stories have to have structure. It doesn't matter whether you get to this structure by writing, 3 different drafts of the novel, or if you plan it out ahead of time and write one draft and have the structure from there. Either way, you have to come to this structure in the final version of your story if you want it to work. So this is what story structure looks like. There are 3 main plot points: the first plot point, the midpoint, and the second plot point. And then there are 2 minor points, the pinch point, 1 and 2. There's 2 different ones. So the way it works is the beginning of the story is called the setup phase. It's when we're being set up to learn more about the character, the protagonists, what their life is like at this point, how things are going, where we're leading. And in the setup phase is when you're really setting up for the story that's to come. And the story that's to come is what happens at the first plot point. So once the first plot point hits, that's when the real story starts. That's when the purpose of reading this book starts. It's when the antagonist is introduced. It's when something is introduced that causes the protagonist to have to take a journey of some kind to solve a problem, to gain something, to figure something out, whatever it is. That all happens at the first plot point. Now, once the first plot point hits, we're in what's called the reaction phase. So now the protagonist is reacting to what happened at the first plot point. The protagonist is running through the story, planning things and figuring things out. Maybe they're hiding, they're running, they're, trying things that aren't working. And then the midpoint happens. And the midpoint is a very important part of the story because it's really what shifts the story into a totally new direction. And it introduces the hero, or rather the protagonist, to finally start becoming heroic. Once you're in the third part of the story, that's the attack phase. That's when you're going to start seeing the protagonist start taking action, start doing things to start attacking this problem that was introduced at the first plot point and probably made more of a problem at the midpoint. So now then the second plot point hits. This is the final bit of information or new information to enter the story. After this point, nothing new can come into the story. That is the final piece that shifts us, or rather shifts the protagonist, into part 4 of the story, which is the resolution. This is when everything comes down. It's when the antagonist either gets defeated or defeats the protagonist. It's when the protagonist is able to finally earn that title of hero. Now, this is just basic structure. This is what it looks like. And this is true for all stories, whether it's a movie, whether it's a book. Anything that's published or in a movie is going to have this structure. And they may not always call it this, but this is what it looks like, and this is what it is. Learn this structure, and you will have so much better experiences with writing stories, and you're going to be a lot more organized. So all stories must also have architecture, which are basically the scenes that link these milestones together. Each scene in the story should have a purpose, and it needs to move the story forward. This is purpose-driven storytelling. Every single scene has to add something to the story and push it forward. If it doesn't do that, you shouldn't have it in there. When you organize your story in this way, you're going to come a lot closer to having a draft that you can actually do something with, as opposed to a draft that you just end up scrapping, putting in a drawer, and never using again. You can learn more about story structure and getting organized in this way by reading the book Story Engineering by Larry Brooks. Or you can also check out my blog. I just recently did a story structure series. It's jenniferblanchard.net. So now that you know how to deal with your FDD, fears, distractions, and disorganization, you can be an unstoppable writer. You just got to stick with it. The Idea to Draft Story Intensive can help you overcome the disorganization that keeps you from writing your novel, and it will help you to finally take that story idea that's been in your head for such a long time and turn it into a draft. You can learn more about it by going to tinyurl.com/idea-to-draft, or if you're ready to sign up, you can go to jenniferblanchard.net/idea-to-draft.